Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome again, everybody. My name is Rashed-Ali. I'm the Associate Dean of Research and Innovation in Texas Tech University. Welcome to our virtual workshop, Knowledge Dissemination in Architecture and Design Research. So before I say anything, just a quick reminder that this session is being recorded and hopefully we will make the recording available online in a few weeks. As I mentioned, I'm the Associate Dean of Research in Texas Tech University. This workshop is hopefully one of a series of workshops that we plan to put together in Texas Tech, focusing on architectural research related issues. So this workshop really started as an idea of something that we as a faculty in Texas Tech can have together. And then we thought, okay, why not invite somebody who actually knows what he's doing or what she's doing? So we started looking for keynote speakers, for guest speakers. Then when we did find an excellent guest speaker, we thought, let's open it up. Maybe some people outside Texas Tech might be interested. Well, we ended up with about 120 registrations from 18 different countries right now. So I'm really happy that the workshop has generated so much interest. It speaks to, I think, the importance of the topic, but it also speaks to the quality of our guest speaker, who I'll have the privilege of introducing in a few minutes. Before I do so, I wanted to walk you quickly through the structure of the workshop. So we have 2 hours scheduled. We'll start with a presentation from our guest speaker, which will be about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. Then we'll go to a question and answer sessions. As you know, there was a survey that we sent out to everybody who registered. We did get about 35 responses, which is a fairly good response rate for a survey. So the survey included some questions that we asked you to propose, and we got a really large number of excellent questions. So we will start with those. We broke them up into 2 categories. The first are specific questions about publishing in architecture journals. Our guest speaker has incredible expertise in that area, and we will start with those and give him the opportunity to respond to them. But then we'll move after that to a group of questions that deal with larger issues relating to knowledge dissemination and architecture. And here we would like to turn that into a discussion more than just a question and answer. So I'll pose the questions, our guest speaker will get an opportunity to respond, and then anybody in the audience who feels that they want to contribute to that topic will be more than welcome to. If you haven't sent your questions through the survey, feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll do our best to get to those as well. What I would request is that, first of all, please keep yourself in mute. We have a very large number, potentially a very large number of people joining the workshop. And if you want to join the discussion, please raise your hand and I will call on you to join the discussion. So now it's my privilege really to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Ashraf Salama. Let me just pull up his bio quickly. And I need to read his bio because really there's so many things to say that it's hard to stop. So I'm going to start by reading the bio that we published. Dr. Ashraf Salama is a full professor in architecture and the director of research at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. He has led 3 schools of architecture in Egypt, in Qatar, and in the United Kingdom, 2 of which he has actually founded. Most recently, he was the head of the School of Architecture at the University of Strathclyde from 2014 to 2020. He held several tenured and visiting appointments in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and in Europe. His experience spans across many contexts. He has been the director of research and consulting at Adams Group Architects in Charlotte, North Carolina, and has published over 170 outputs in the International Refereed Press and authored and edited 14 books. He is the chief editor of Archnet-IJAR, the International Journal of Architectural Research, and Open House International. He's also the 2017 recipient of the Jan Chumi Prize for Excellence in Architecture Education and Criticism. This prize is awarded by the UIA. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Professor Salama.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Hazem, for this nice introduction, and thank you for having me. I will start by sharing the slides and the presentation, and I would like to thank the audience too, and I can see some of the old friends who are here too, so I thank them for their attendance. So let me start by sharing the presentation, and then we'll go through the talk. Okay, does everyone see the screen well? Okay, so good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. In this time, some of us are in the afternoon or late afternoon or early evening, and others are early morning and probably in Texas. And I should start first by thanking Texas Tech College of Architecture and Dr. Hazem Rashed-Ali for organizing this workshop and for inviting me to speak. It is also nice, as I said, to see a number of old friends and colleagues, and so I thank them for attending. The topic about knowledge dissemination occupies current interests of both university administrations and faculty members throughout the world. This is given the quantity and quality of requirements of faculty members that they have to address when seeking promotion, when seeking new appointments in new institutions, or during the annual appraisal process and development process, which take place in many universities around the world. So following the structure of the workshop, I will be first presenting and then address the set of questions which were already communicated, and then any relevant points or questions we like to cover that would be also introduced. So the talk is structured in three key components, I would say. The first is about architecture and design research. So there is a little bit about research, where key issues related to research and knowledge typologies are highlighted. The second part is about dissemination, impact, and assessment, where key points related to planning for dissemination are covered. And then the third part, which is about disseminations through publishing, and I will be focusing on journal publishing, and some of the associated metrics for individual researchers' journals or outputs. I believe the three components combined would respond to many of the issues that present themselves on the map of current interests in architecture and urban design research in academia, as well as some of the points raised by colleagues in the form of questions. So here is the first section, which is predicated on the need for research on architecture. Why do we do research in architecture? Why do we have design research? And the overall global research landscape is also important to see and cover. It also covers typologies of research as conducted by researchers or designers, or design researchers, and the associated philosophical positions. So some of the content is a little bit heavy, but it is important to really cover it as part of our contextualization of dissemination. The first question that would come to mind, and I keep presenting this slide everywhere in my presentations and in my talks, is about the need for research in architecture and design related fields. And why do we need to conduct research in architecture? Why do we need to write about architecture and about urbanism and about urban design? Is it only to advance knowledge of the discipline? If it was that, then, and that only, then we will end up speaking to ourselves as fellow academics. We will speak to ourselves within the boundaries of the academic environment or university campuses. So it's about other things. It should also be about addressing real world problems, challenges, examining opportunities those challenges create. And there are three key challenges that we can capture here quickly. One, there is a complexity in these challenges in the built environment. The problems associated with the deterioration of the built environment is a second component of these elements that warrant the development of research in architecture and urbanism. And of course, the associated societal and environmental challenges. The emergence of new designs is also an aspect that warrant the development of research. Designs, technologies that have significant environmental implications. So in essence, the key point here is that the multiplicity of issues and challenges that education, research, practice have to encounter and prepare future professionals for. And this is evident in the amount of complexity problems that exist in the built environment. And we can go over many problems, but I will mention some here which constitute areas of research also. We are seeing transformations in the structure of contemporary societies. There is a rising need of special populations, women, children, and those with special needs. Continuous crisis of housing and squatter settlements. Emergence of new building typologies that accommodate new types of clients and users. Surge in the construction of sustainable environments and the full spectrum of sustainability. The global condition and the associated loss of identities. Urban sprawl, which characterize rapidly developing contexts. Displacement of communities as a result of natural disasters or civic conflicts or wars. The needs for post-industrial cities and societies, and how their attempts to diversify their economies is reflected on the urban environment. Income inequality and how it manifests in harsh realities in the built environment. These are significant challenges, and dealing with them require different types of knowledge and different types of researchers who are capable to identify problems, interrogate opportunities, and develop visions, and ultimately develop designs for meaningful future human habitats. So these challenges tell us a lot. First of all, they tell us about knowledge typologies within architecture and design research. They tell us that demands for multiple types of knowledge are clearly on the rise. For example, when you look at this diagram, knowledge of how to deal with problems associated with special populations that form major segments of contemporary societies, children, seniors, the disabled. Knowledge of how to involve people affected by design decisions in the process of making those decisions. Knowledge that respond to advances in building and communication technologies. Knowledge that respond to socioeconomic and socio-political contexts. The list goes on and on and on, many knowledge typologies. And this diagram is not exclusive. One can add many axes and many lines across this diagram to represent emerging types of knowledge. And these will be based on new challenges and new contexts. So this complexity of the challenges mandates continuously seeing the development of architecture and design research at the intersection of these four elements. And this is a challenge really for architects, urban designers, and design researchers, seeing the development of design research as a discipline and its associated professions in order to integrate different types of knowledge required for addressing some of the preceding challenges. And we can see here natural sciences, humanities, social and behavioral sciences, arts. And we operate at the intersection of these. The diagram shows that we need to operate at the intersection of these. We need more of intersecting efforts between these areas. And I would say is that the challenge now is for researchers in architecture and urbanism in terms of dissemination, because you have to relate to a discipline. And most of the disciplines, or most of the journals and most of the academic channels for disseminations are focusing on one area. So if we are addressing a problem that bridge boundaries between humanities and social sciences, sometimes the work is not suitable for any journal because specific journals have specific requirements and protocols and paradigms of thinking, or as one of the questions we received, their school of thought. But most important is that the complexity of the problems and the complexity of knowledge typologies represent a hybrid condition, an uncertain condition. And these conditions require hybrid modes of inquiry, hybrid modes of knowing, approaches to investigation, approaches to knowledge acquisition, assimilation, hybrid approaches of knowledge construction, deconstruction, consumption, and production. All of these are really important to be able to address the type of problems we are encountering. With this, the classical discussion about mono, multi, and interdisciplinarity ensues, and that these approaches have not effectively enabled solving many of the contemporary environmental and social challenges as they relate to architecture and urbanism. The idea of hybridity of knowledge brings us to the notion of transdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity is about transgressing the boundaries of disciplines. The reason that these didn't work, even interdisciplinarity didn't work to address the problems, if you notice, as an example, when a researcher in architecture and a researcher in another discipline sit together to collaborate or to address a research problem or a research question, say engineering or social sciences, the first point that they start to say is, we don't do things this way. We don't do it this way. And this is, once it is said, it automatically emphasizes the boundaries. So the idea of transdisciplinarity is about transgressing the boundaries of disciplines based on the belief that no discipline can have strong claims over its own direction, value, or output, including dissemination, in solving social environmental problems, in isolation from what is happening in other fields of inquiry. So this is really important. Within transdisciplinarity, there are also layers of knowledge that should be integrated. And these relate to scientific or expert knowledge, which we do as academics, but there is also indigenous knowledge. There is practical or vocational knowledge. There is tacit or experiential knowledge. All these knowledge typologies need to be integrated in what we do. In order not to speak too abstract, this is a transdisciplinary research framework trying to understand the social-spatial implications of the COVID-19 condition, trying to argue that in order to address urban dynamics or distancing measures, or emerging living and working patterns, we really need to work with other disciplines. Architects and design researchers will not be able to do it on their own. We need to work with urban and human geography experts, urban design and planning, transportation engineering, to be able to understand some of the urban dynamics resulting from the COVID condition. Disaster psychology, environmental psychology, and how this overlap with architecture when we try to look at distancing measures and other disciplines. So this is just an idea of how transdisciplinary work would be conceived as part of what we do. Generically, there are two types of research in architecture and urbanism. If we assume that research is to produce knowledge, then they are classified based on the knowledge typology that they generate. Type A and type B. And type A is about understanding the future through a better understanding of the past. In a way, this is a type of historical research because we focus on history, but we also try to relate to the future. If, for example, we are examining some theories of the modernist period in the 40s, we are examining them to learn from them and see their implications or applicability in contemporary times. Type B is about probing new ideas and principles that could shape the future. And in the first case, research is used to test the accepted ideas in type A, or validate them. And in the second case, research is used to develop new visions and verify new ideas. There are three major systems of inquiry, and all of us are familiar, but this is just a reminder of Groth and Wang work, which is influential in many ways. And from that, we can read a lot about the nature of research in architecture and urbanism. And they emerge from two philosophical positions in terms of ontology, which speaks about the nature of reality, and epistemology, the way in which knowledge about that reality is developed and tested. And within these two philosophical positions, there is a number of positions that the researcher would adopt. For example, the positivist position, which ontologically adopts the view that objects of sense perception exist independently of the observer mind. And that means that there is one objective reality. And this relates, for example, to engineering and experimental research as it relates to architecture. Epistemologically, it believes that knowledge is objectively verifiable. The anti-positivist position, which ontologically adopts the belief that objects of sense perception do not exist independently of the observer's mind, which means that there are multiple realities. And these multiple realities are based on social constructs. They are epistemologically emphasizing the discovery of variations and differences and values and preferences. The emancipationist position is similar to the anti-positivist in terms of ontological and epistemological orientations, but it goes a step further in trying to intervene with reality. So when we talk about co-production and co-design and participatory architecture, participatory planning, all of these alternative practices are focusing in a way on the emancipationist position, trying to intervene and improve the reality. I would say before embarking on a research exercise and later in a dissemination plan, a researcher would need to identify his or her position and thus the associated system of inquiry and make that clear for themselves and for potential audience. Within the preceding three positions, when reviewing more than 60 years of architecture and design research, we can find that there are two generic types: technically oriented research and conceptually driven research. Technically oriented is more empirical and more focused on empirical investigations. Conceptually driven research is driven by theories and driven by ideas as they relate to the use and production of built environments. Each one of them have frames of reference, and we can try to understand these frames of reference in terms of, for example, the technically oriented research is basically three frames of references: systematic, computational, and managerial. And I'm gonna come to these. And these are also types of research. So it places emphasis on the process procedures as the primary basis of effective design. The conceptually driven research or perspective, there are two key frames of reference, and they are psychological, trying to look at the psychology of designers, how designers think, design cognitions, design thinking, and all of these areas of inquiry. And then person-environment research. And here I'm classifying person-environment research in two typologies, or in two types. One type that is integrated with the design activity, and one type which relates to advancing knowledge in the area. It goes without saying that there have been several classifications of what research and architecture is, but this is one of the interpretation of what it is based on the past 60, 70 years. The characteristics of these research types can be outlined here in this slide. I will basically try to skip it, but the technically oriented research is basically constituted in systematic research, computational research, managerial research. When we say managerial research, is basically about logical inquiry into various aspects of architecture profession, the practice itself, trying to look for alternative practices. And then the bottom three is basically, or are governing the conceptually driven research. One relates to design thinking and the other two relates to person-environment interactions, and all relevant factors, psychological, sociocultural, behavioral, technological, that impact buildings, built environments, and people. There are areas or types that continue to evolve. Some of these are evolving and generating new research forms and new research typologies, but they have expanded into growing spheres of inquiry, including, for example, examining urban traditions through traditional dwellings and settlements research, trying to learn from the past in a more structured and rigorous way. Quality of urban life research and the full spectrum of sustainable development and urbanism. Pedagogical research through examining teaching and learning and design studio teaching practices. All of these are areas of research that researchers in architecture and urbanism have been doing. Within the framework of these knowledge types, it is maintained that the primary objective of methodological research in architecture and allied design disciplines is to investigate designs, products, buildings, built environments, cities, whether made by human beings, experts, or made by non-designers, traditional or vernacular. As it relates to architecture and design research, it can also be seen within these parameters, and there is a lot of discussions about these terms. Research by or through design and research on or for design, and research into design. And these are important for us really as design researchers, because the idea here is not to exclude research as part of design practice. It is important to include it, but how to include it is the challenge. How to present it in an academic format is the challenge that probably many of us are facing. So research by or through design means that research is done by means of designing, not the design of the building itself. So an issue is investigated by means of designing. It is about the generation of research insights by performing a design exercise. So trying to generate knowledge through a design exercise. Then research on or for design is basically means that research done about designs for the purpose of designing itself. So examples of this, for example, could include pre-design research, evidence-based design research, brief development, architecture programming, to develop design parameters and design imperatives, or even post-occupancy evaluation exercises when they are undertaken as a form of precedent. It's like taking precedents a step further and interrogate previous examples through post-occupancy evaluation. Then research into design, which is basically about the development of knowledge and encompasses social sciences, humanities, and all kinds of frames that were presented in the previous slide. Whether systematic, computational, managerial, psychological, all of these elements are part of research into design. But still, research by or through design, or research done for the purpose of designing, are immature and not fully recognized in academia. And the idea is to bring them to the discussion and try to see on and for and by or through as part of scholarship and research practice. Further qualities can be explored by looking at the nature of research questions which a research project or research exercise is trying to answer, and the relevant types of research. And you can see here a number of typologies: descriptive, comparative, correlational, exploratory, explanatory, evaluation or assessment, many. For example, I'm not going to read the whole slide, but for example, comparative research describes and explains characteristics of two situations, their causes or transformations, or both. And then there is a relevant question to this. The associated question would be, for example, if we take squatter settlements in Brazil. So what are the differences and similarities between squatter settlements in Rio and in Sao Paulo, for example? That's a question that is relevant to comparative research, and so on. Correlational research aims to discover or establish the existence of a relationship between two or more aspects of a situation, and then it has a corresponding question, and so on and so forth. So these are really important to consider when developing research and research projects, research proposals, and also when developing dissemination plans, because the nature of the questions determine the type of audience, and I'll come to this later. And research could also be purely theoretical, which many in architecture and allied disciplines undertake, tries to link current research with the existing body of knowledge. So basically, theoretical research is guided by theory, and it attempts to contribute to the development of theories, and applicable to both social sciences or social science research, theoretical research in the arts and humanities, and as approaches which are based on three theories, as we can see here: critical theory, postmodern theory, and phenomenology. And each of them, I'm sure many of us would have their definitions and also would have their operational definitions. For example, critical theory relate to the influence of power, authority, as well as how political, historical, and socioeconomic forces influence people and their environment. So we can look at this as a form of theoretical research. And the same applies to postmodern theory, post-structuralism, and phenomenology. But a number of qualities are critical to the development of knowledge resulting from research. And here we're coming closer now to actual dissemination. So in order to communicate that knowledge, it has to have specific qualities. And these qualities are, as you can see here, distinct and clear, communicable, and repeatable. These are major three qualities. Resistance to multiple or confusing interpretations. Describable in words and text and illustrations and graphics. Repeatable, which means that others repeating the same research exercise must come to the same finding or very similar findings if they are adopting the same methods and following the same research protocol. So it should also be purposive, inquisitive, informed, and methodical. These qualities, in my view, are a must in any research exercise and associated dissemination effort. There is a wide variety of books and publications that address these qualities in different ways, depending on the focus. Many of them relate to architecture and design research, and from various perspectives, visual research methods, architecture research as it relates to practice, research in landscape architecture, and others also are trying to develop arguments on the need for architecture criticism. Because we always see architecture criticism compared to assessment research as either or. Here, the argument of that book, for example, Architecture Beyond Criticism, is trying to look at them as equally important paradigms of thinking required for the development of knowledge. And of course, research in arts and humanities, landscape architecture, and many others. So at this stage, we can move into the second component of the talk, which addresses dissemination, impact, and assessment, and the types of dissemination and scholarship in architecture and design research. The first point I would like to raise is really about the definition of dissemination. What is dissemination?